same deal. You're going to right click on this frames, click new, click on this SWOOD frame, and we're going to call this, let's just call it lower cabinet. It is a good idea to try to stay like as consistent as possible like throughout your SWOOD library, just so you can be more organized. Another thing that you could do in each of these libraries is create a folder. So let's say you had like MDF cabinets, let's say, and you wanted to move this to that folder just to keep things like more organized. You could do that as well. So we'll go ahead, edit this, and what comes in here is a pre-made assembly file rather than a part file. And the reason being, like, cabinet is made up of several different parts. Just to keep this really basic and simple, what we're going to want to do is put the outside of our panels on the inside of this bounding box sketch, as you can see here. It'll make more sense as I drop them in. So we're going to go over to this panels library, right click on that, and you can create a copy, but what we want to do is insert a copy of this panel. So when I do that, this window over here opens up. So this is just to generate a new panel. This is to generate a new panel, but it's positioned into space. And then lastly, this is to delete the panel that you dropped in. So if I click on this, this panel just kind of comes into space, and you have a couple options, like you can move the panel around. You have this like triad part selection where you can like move it in the X, Y, and Z position. You can also change the angle of the panel, whether it's this way, or this way. And then finally, you can snap these panels into place. And since I have this thing like kind of all wonky, I may just go ahead, delete this panel, which is, I'll select on it just like this, click this delete panel, and it's gone. I typically don't advise people to use this new panel. I almost always use this new panel position. And as you can see, you can choose where the panel is in space. So to start off with, let's start with our left side. So I'll go ahead and click on that. So these little arrows on the outside need to be constrained to something. So the way that these panels work, they have to be constrained to a plane or a distance off of that plane. So if you still have those arrows left when you try to rebuild, you know that your panel isn't fully constrained. So we're going to click on this arrow and see how this like side is moving in space. I can then hover over that front plane, and it's like, oh, you want to mate it to this front plane. I let go of the click, and then that arrow then becomes a dot. So that means that this point is now constrained in space. When I click on this, I have a couple options. As you can see, that coincident mate is here. This is to create like an offset distance. So if I wanted to make this like 2.5 inches offset, it'll do that and recognize that. And let's say I wanted to do it the other direction, I can flip that direction of that offset. I don't want to worry about doing any sort of offsets right now, so I'll keep that as coincident. And this is to delete the mate. So if you click that, hit check, that arrow comes back, and you see I'd have to remate this into place. So that has been created. I'll hit OK. And I want to do the same for the bottom. So you see how I'm dragging this arrow, hover over that bottom plane, made it there. I want to do the same for the back. Have that arrow, hover over the back plane. Oh, and that kind of just moved all wonky. Now I want to mate this top, so I'm going to hover over this top plane, mate it there. And there's still 1 degree of freedom. As you can see, when I go to drag it, this panel's like moving back and forth. This actually took me a while to figure out. I was like, why can't I get this to mate? But basically what you have to do, you don't drag on the arrow and try to hover over the plane. What you want to do is grab this face, hover over the plane, drop that in, and you see that becomes a dot as opposed to an arrow. So now that whole panel is created and saved into space. So once you have this fully constrained, you can hit this checkbox. And as you can see, these are all checked off. This is the panel has been created. There's an equation drop down associated with your panel. We won't worry about that right now. And then these are your mates in space created. So when you start getting like X's or like warning buttons, maybe it's something to investigate. And as you get more comfortable with the SWOOD infrastructure, you can like kind of diagnose what those are specifically. So as you can see, this panel is now on the inside of that sketch bounding box. And this is just the left side of it. So now we want to create our other sides. So we'll do the same thing again. We'll right click on here. We'll select insert copy. And this time we'll go to panel's position and we're going to do the right side. So a little hack that kind of makes your life a bit easier is when you position your panel into space and all of your arrows are pretty much like exactly where you want to mate them. Like this side is like pretty much aligned with that bottom. This side is pretty much aligned with the front, with the back, and also the top, so on and so forth. What you can do is instead of like dragging each individual arrow to each plane, you can just hit the C button. I'll hit C, and as you can see, all of those things have been mated in place. Like as you can see, that's mated to the front, this is mated to the bottom, this to the back, this to the top, so on and so forth. And you don't have to only go one panel at a time. Like we can go ahead and before hitting the check mark, introduce your other panels. And this top panel actually isn't going to be mated to the plane, but rather we want to mate it to the inside of these like left side and right side panels. So to do that, we'll drag this arrow and select it onto that face, and boom, that's mated to the inside of this panel. This one made it to the inside of this panel. This one to the front. Ooh. This one to the back. And then, as you can see, this degree of freedom is still loose, so we want to grab the top of this panel, not the arrow, because that won't mate to anything if I grab the arrow. If I grab the top, hover over that top, we're good to go on that. And another tip, before you rebuild, you see how this like SWOOD panels are discolored and like it's kind of like purple on this face, pink on this face, gray on this face, and this is actually like our MDF material. So these are all the panels that you're technically still editing. So let's say if I wanted to delete this top panel, I can click this delete panel, and that's an option. Whereas if, like I can't select this panel in this dialog box once I've hit that check mark. So sometimes it's good to for ease to do this all at once, and sometimes there's a situation where it's good to rebuild one panel at a time. Really, it's up to you. But so yeah, we'll go ahead, re-snap these arrows into place, and as you can see, like this front arrow is aligned with that front, this one with the back, so I can hit C and it'll automatically recognize those planes and mate them into place. And for this bottom panel, what I'm going to do, I could come over, click this panel position, insert a back. totally a viable option. But instead, since it's going to be pretty much exactly the same as this top panel, at least the sides that it's going to be mated to, rather than inserting a new one, dragging the arrows to the front plane, back plane, left plane, right plane, whatever, I can then click this top panel. If I hold Control and click on it, drag it down, it creates a copy. So when I let go, you can see that 4 of these faces are mated into place. And there's only one mate that I need to create for, or that's like left unconstrained, and it's that like in that Z direction. So what I'll do just for this one, click on that there, and boom, all mated into place. So then I'll hit this checkpoint or check box. All of my planes, I have all green check marks. We're good to go. And with these sketches, you can hide these. Those sketches are gone now. So cool. We have our top, left side, right side, bottom. And when I do that, and I go ahead and save this assembly, I'll show you guys the file structure. So in here, we'll go to our SWOOD data folder. To you guys, it will probably just be called SWOOD data. And that depends where you save it. So I save mine in my documents folder. So you'll go to that like SWOOD data folder, and inside that SWOOD design folder, there'll be a frames folder. So the cabinet that I created for our lower cabinet is inside this MDF cabinets folder. So open that back up, MDF cabinets, and there's the assembly, and then the panels that are made into copies are saved here. So this should basically align with the naming structure that we have in our SOLIDWORKS assembly. So what I typically do is once I've saved my assembly, I want to rename these panels to give me a better idea of like what I'm working with. So like this is a left, this is a right, this is a top. And since I copied that top, this one also got named top. So what I'll do, I'll just rename it, and I'll do like LS for our left side, rename this RS for right side, rename this for top, and then rename this for bottom. So once that is all renamed, we can go ahead and save it. And when I go back to that same file location, which is deep in here, SWOOD design, frames, MDF cabinet, you can see bottom, left side, right side, top, changed just the same. So cool. So let's go ahead, let's add a back, and let's add a fixed shelf. So to do that, we'll go back to our SWOOD panel, select Insert Copy, and hover over this back here. So as you can see, it's not really positioned into place. If I were to hit the C button and rebuild, I would have some interferences here. Let's for now just put this back and mate it to the inside of the box. So we'll go, I'm dragging each side, mating it to the inside of the box, just like so. And there's still one more degree of freedom. So let's mate it to the back. And I highly recommend whenever you're doing these, especially when you're going to edit like or mate your panels, I try to always avoid mating like the outside edges, because when you add edge banding, it kind of affects those mates. So like on an instance like this, as opposed to mating this to the outside panel here, I'd much rather made it to this back side here. So cool. Added in our back. That's there, as you can see. And let's create a shelf. So with the shelf, we want to be able to define where that shelf is in space inside of this frame. So to do that, what I'll do is I'm going to create a plane. And to get to your planes, I created a shortcut on my shortcut panel, and I have plane kind of like saved here. But for you guys that have not done that yet, what you could do is select the face that you want the plane to reference, go to your reference geometry in your assembly tab, and click on plane. From there, this we can define this as, maybe let's do like 15 inches for now, and this is definitely adjustable. So we'll put that into place. I recommend renaming this plane, and we'll call it like shelf bottom offset. So there's that 15. So now when we go to insert another panel, we'll click on the shelf option, and we'll mate all the arrows into place. This one here, this one here, this one to the front, and now this degree of freedom. Since we're referencing the bottom offset, it depends like what you want to define that. If you want to, in your drawings, to define that measurement as like the top of the plane, you'll mate the top to that plane that you created. Whereas let's say you wanted to measure like the space from here to here in your drawings, you would mate the bottom to that plane. So right now, let's just keep it bottom. We'll hit check, and there's your shelf. And now, if I want to edit this, I'll come over to this plane in my feature tree, right click on that, and I can make this 20 inches. Boom. When I go to rebuild, that has been moved up to that 20-inch mark, and I can show you that here, 20 inches. So what we'll do, go ahead, rename this BK for back, rename this to shelf, and this is our completed beginner's frame. We're not going to worry about fasteners yet. Creating those or get a bit more complicated, and just to help you guys create your first element, let's just keep it at this. And once this is saved, like in the future, if you guys want to start adding edge banding, if you guys want to start adding connectors to fasten the box together, you can do that. Like once you close out of here, go and edit your frame. You can make any changes that you want, and you're kind of like right back off where you last saved. So cool.